a weekly segment that I do with my man 30 and Still Gaming, and we got a whole lot to recap and cover this week in the Reforge Recap. Sometimes the title and thumbnail will say Reforge Recap, but this week we're not covering a bunch of different gaming topics. We're just going to be covering all of the Xbox leaks. I broke it into 3 sections throughout the week. I covered the hardware leaks first, then the stuff about Game Pass, and then just this morning we talked about how they still want Mario. Now we're going to pepper in here the fact that the CMA has provisionally approved the Activision deal. Seems that selling the cloud rights to Ubisoft has helped. So I'm going to end the previous stream about Nintendo and bring everybody over with a redirect. Make sure when you guys come over, you smash like on the previous video as well. That helps out. And I do owe you guys some members. I'll do that throughout this stream. We've already got 135 out of 150. That's crazy. So we're going to be breaking this down into segments, but I want to do a flyover first just to see, Mike, what was your general thought and reaction to this this leak? Everybody at first thought that it was the FTC's fault, or that obviously everyone's like, Sony pushed for this. Microsoft did this to themselves. They so somebody somewhere submitted the wrong thing. So what was your initial thought when you saw this hit? Because this is pretty significant for a variety of reasons.
I mean, originally, the initial, I woke up and I woke up at like 6:30 in the morning, and my feed was just layered with things happening. I was like, first thing I was like, oh, what did the FTC do, right? And then I was like, oh, someone messed up. And then in the morning, the very first thing I reported on, the very first story I brought up was that they did it was rumored. They said because they interviewed the judge, and the judge said no, Microsoft did it to themselves. They submitted it wrong. So I said that first thing when I went live on my stream, but everyone has these little things going. They're like, oh, what did the FTC do? This is all, they're trying to set up Microsoft and all this stuff. But honestly, I look at it and go, I'm not surprised. Honestly, after I went through all those things, I was like, I'm not really surprised. I mean, in the past years, all the leaks we saw, what happened with Sony, now with other like with Nintendo stuff, and now with Microsoft, especially with Microsoft with the FTC. I mean, not surprised at all. Now, am I surprised about all the stuff that was leaked up until 2030? I was like, yeah, that's a little surprising. That was a little shocking. I thought maybe just the couple years that we just saw, like 2021, 22, 23. I didn't know it was going to go past and beyond, 2027 to 2030.
Right. And that's sort of, I went there in the middle, but we'll go there first because you went there, because I actually think the hardware is super damaging. But let's go to the 2030 aspect. They've got these charts, these plans where they want to be, and it's pretty ambitious. Now, some people told me I was misreading Phil Spencer's response to that chart. He's saying, if this is where we are in 2027, we would be out of the business. He wants to see a majority of their customers not on their hardware by 2030. Right. And I was told that I was misreading or whatever. Now, I think some people are being a little hyperbolic about the chart. They're like, well, they're out of business in 2027. There's no way. And it does seem like that's a possibility, though, because Game Pass has stagnated. It's stalled out at 25 million, and their own projections wanted them to be higher than that by now, and even then significantly higher than that by 2030. Where do you stand on that aspect of it? Their projections, they want and they want to have more of their customers off their hardware. That's kind of in line with some of the stuff that we've been saying as well.
Yeah, I've been saying for years that they said that their biggest competition is not Sony. Their biggest competition is Google and Amazon. They're moving towards that realm. Amazon doesn't have a console. Google doesn't have a console, right? They're all trying to wedge for that cloud gaming, mobile devices, streaming services. They're all doing the same exact thing, right? Even Google, even though Stadia was a bomb, that was their attempt to figure it out and then make a fix, right? Because they still use the technology. They're just using it they're going to use it for something else or make something better down the road. So I think the 2027 thing is hyperbolic. I do. I think even in the report, Phil says these are projections. These are not the exact things that are going to happen. This is just what people came up with. They look at the percentage. Okay, this is what we've grown. This is what we need to get to that point. So, I mean, it's not to the T. So when people look at that and go, look, there's no way they're done in 2027. They're fine. They're fine. Remember that Microsoft is the most profitable it's been ever in Microsoft with Phil Spencer at the helm. Even though they're struggling and they're third place, they're still the most successful they've been ever with the consoles since the beginning of Xbox. So I think if 2027 comes and they don't continuously see that that growth, then yeah, maybe at 2027 they go, all right, we got to turn this around. Maybe we have to change Game Pass up a bit. Maybe we have to make a different membership tier. Maybe we have to increase the price, something along those lines. It's not just 2027 comes or like, it's not Y2K where everyone's waiting for the ball to drop and then all of a sudden the lights shut out and everyone has no power, right? That's not what's going to happen to Microsoft.
Do you envision a world, though, where they do say, let's get out of here? This isn't working. Because they are doing the best they ever have, but that's not comparing to much, right? Like, even the recent charts put out by Tweaktown put out this chart and was showing the profit margins of, like, Sony, Nintendo, but Xbox called it an accountability margin, and obviously everyone's like, oh, they have better margins. Sony's margins were also down because they had spent money on Bungie. So it was like, of course, their margins, instead of being around $4 billion, they're around $1 billion. And then Nintendo's were higher. So given that, we can say, oh, they're doing better than they ever have. I mean, that's not comparing to much. Microsoft sort of
comparing to themselves. Yeah.
Right, which wasn't so hot. Okay, so
still profitable.
They've said profitable for themselves. I don't think as an entity gaming's profitable. I think it's profitable for Microsoft because of what their long game is to loss lead their way. So I think currently it's still operating not at a profit. It's profitable for the endeavor. I think there's a difference. That even in their own language, they don't let us see profit margins because I don't think there are any for Xbox currently.
Right.
So knowing Microsoft and how they shut things down, right? Like they throw all this money at Mixer, doesn't work. Throw all this money, Windows Phone stops it, doesn't work. And sort of the way that they'll abandon something if it's not profitable. And that's not unique to Microsoft, by the way. I think that's something that companies of this size do. They're like, it's not working.
Oh, sure.
Kill it. Do you see a world where they just exit gaming entirely, or does it look differently? Is it like, well, we're just going to exit platform. We're going to turn into a publisher? Like, I don't know. I think there's a variety of ways this plays out, but it does seem possible that they exit in some fashion.
Okay, well, let's say in a world that we're talking 2030, let's say the consoles are done, right? And they've now made it to maybe not 100 million people, but maybe they have like 65 or 70 million subscribers for Game Pass. And they go, you know what? Not many people are buying consoles anymore, so let's just move there. Does that mean they bow out of the consoles or bow out of gaming? Or is it just a different iteration of what they're doing? So I think that, sure, could they possibly leave gaming and then it's just Sony and Nintendo, and then maybe someone else throws their hat in the ring and becomes the third party, and then they're in third place, whatever? Or does Microsoft just evolve and keep that console there where it's still a small percentage, and now they're bigger with cloud gaming and Game Pass going into the future? I don't know. That's hard to say, but I don't see them just up and leaving, because Microsoft's a $1 trillion company. Just to keep their hat in the ring, if anything, it's like a tax write-off, right? They're just like, let's just throw money over there and move money around, because that's what these companies do. They just buy things to move money around. So, yeah, sure, they might be losing money, but I don't think they get out of it because they're still making money. They're still keeping relevant in the world of the bigger picture of Microsoft, right? I mean, Xbox, Microsoft. Game Pass, Microsoft. Microsoft's 360, 365 Office. Microsoft's the operating system. They have their hand in a whole bunch of different pies, so...
What on this subject? So in the leaks about the forecast all the way to 2030, we got to see an email where they were in 2022. Feels like he called it a disaster situation because Starfield was getting delayed, and they were like, "We're going to go 16 months without a first party title." And so he says we need to put together an action plan. And this sort of gives birth to the 2022 showcase where they're like, hey, here's all the games in the next 12 months. So I remember saying I really felt like they spoke out of turn during that showcase because they talked about all these games that were coming that did not end up coming on, in time. I think 10 to 12 out of the 25 didn't make it. And I think we see why. They were kind of panicking. They were kind of reacting. In this email, Sarah Bond comes with 20 games that they could target for Game Pass. Did you see these totals? Did you take a peek at this?
For which ones? You're talking about what they pay for games for Game Pass.
It was like, here's an estimate of what this company will ask for.
Yeah, I saw that.
So they were like, it would be $300 million if they wanted to get like Jedi Survivor on Game Pass.
Yeah, day and date.
Yeah, day and date. So
yeah.
No, I thought this is remarkable because I think for the longest time, people were thinking in the realm of like hundreds of thousands of dollars, not hundreds of millions of dollars.
I love that this came out because I actually said that this is what they get paid, and everyone's like, no way they get paid that. And I was like, yeah, that's what they get paid, because that's what they pay to get certain licenses and stuff to get onto Netflix, and when they get onto other streaming services for the movie industry part, right? So I looked at this and said, that's what they get, and they're like, there's no way. So I'm really glad that this came out, because now this validates what I've been saying, that they're getting tens to millions and hundreds of millions of dollars for certain games.
I wouldn't have believed this. I would have been. Yeah, I would have been the skeptic. I'd be like, there's no way. Like, I know Microsoft likes to throw money around, but $300 million? That's an entire budget for a game, for like a major game.
That's what I've been preaching the entire time, my friend. That's what I've been saying.
Okay, so in light of this, okay, the concern I have is that makes Game Pass unsustainable, because you're spending an exorbitant amount of money. Let's say they got Jedi Survivor and they negotiated down to $250 million, $250 billion to get Jedi Survivor. Yeah. And the issue I have there is they have been doing this with pretty good sized titles, and they've stalled out at $25 million, and all signs point to subscription services have stalled out. And going back to Phil's own metric, they want more users that are not currently on Xbox. So I'm looking at the PC user base. I don't see an inroad for Game Pass on the PC user base, because no one's going to go to Game Pass and the PC Xbox experience when they have Steam. Also, the Steam user base, the PC user base, I don't think they're going to be too keen on. I'm sorry, I meant to say billion. I said trillion.
Yeah, I got you.
$250 million, great. That's why you should never do math on the fly. $250 million. $250 million. Sorry, we get into all these numbers, and I'm thinking of like acquisitions are in the billions, and these are in the millions. This is why I'm not a mathematician. So if they're looking at this and saying, okay, so $300 million for Jedi Survivor, and the goal of getting Jedi Survivor is, well, we have to get people on PC to jump into Game Pass.
Yeah.
Well, is the Steam user base, is the PC user base going to be attracted to a subservice where they don't own the game? Because they will not own Jedi Survivor if they do this. They're going to give Xbox $10. They're going to get into Game Pass. They're going to play Jedi Survivor, and they're going to throw it away. They don't get any achievement tracking in Steam. They don't get any of that. Like, I think that's where I'm looking at this saying, that's an exorbitant amount of money that will not net you new user conversion. That's where I see this is just not sustainable. It's just tons and tons of money for, generally it seems like you're just going to be trying to maintain that $25 million.
Well, okay, so a couple of months ago, there was a thing that came out that said that there was 25 million and 15 million were, and again, this is not my numbers, this is the numbers that we read in an article, right? So they said there was 15 million PC users that were paying the higher tier. This is before it went up in price, regardless, right? So it's not 17, this is at the 15, I think it was. And it said there was 15 million people paying $15. And then there was 10 million people paying the lower tier at the $10. And it came total of like $400 million is what Microsoft was making each month on Game Pass with just those 25 people. That's before DLCs. That's before people buy it off Game Pass if they want to buy. That's before microtransactions. That's just the memberships of $400 million, right? And this is, I've been saying this for years, as if you look at this list they have, there's 16 games that were listed. And a combined total, even with the high end of Grand Theft Auto 5 and Red Dead Redemption, it's $1.314 billion for 16 games that could potentially come day and date. Not obviously, not all of them are coming. Some of them are not coming day and date. Some did. Some come back. But speculatively, $1.3 billion, and they make a total of $400 million a month, right, for the year. So they make what is that? That's 4.8 billion, right? Is that correct? Check my math. I'm doing fly math. I'm not saying trillions like Lono.
Yeah, don't do what I did.
Yeah, I'm doing. I think it's 400 million times 12, right? 2, 8, and 4. It's 4.8 billion dollars, if I'm not mistaken, right? I might be wrong. Okay, so now add another 4 months on top of that, because it's 16 games. So let's say they release one game a month for 16 months. You see what I'm saying on Game Pass? And this is how they keep the retention of people. So if they spent $1.3 billion to get 16 games for 16 months, and they dropped one a month for 16 months, they're going to make their money back on that and try to keep those users. And really, they're only trying to keep the users on Game Pass to make what's worth for them for about 4 to 5 months of the 12 months. for new users. So if someone comes in for Starfield and they didn't pay anything for Starfield, $70 is for Starfield. Now they got to stay on there for 7 months. But the average person, right? Some people are paying 10, some people are paying 17, and it comes down to about $13, right? So per user. So they only need them to stay on there for about 4.5 months to recoup that for that. And they feel, I would assume they feel that as that's suffice and that's a win for them. So they only need 4 months out of new users.
Okay, well, hang on, though. So this is the barrier and problem that I see. What you're saying makes sense to me. It's like, okay, when you have 25 million people on a subservice, that generates a lot of money. So it makes sense that Sarah Bond comes to the table and is like, yeah, we'd have to probably throw 300 million at Jedi Survivor. And we look at that and are like, Jiminy Christmas. Well, when you're generating that much money in sub revenue, that's not out of the question. It's not. It's like, well, 1 month of Game Pass will pay for Jedi Survivor. So that to me, okay, you've got a machine that as long as you've got the 25 million, you can continue to go out and throw money at third-party games, which to me, I'm like thinking, my gosh, instead of going and paying for games that are already created and coming to market, like, imagine if that money would have went to 343 and you'd have had more full-time staff and they wouldn't have had to lean on contractors so much. Like, that's where my mind goes. I'm like, that's so much money. Right. Let's just let that stand, though. Let's say that Mike makes a good point. Game Pass, 25 million strong. It's a functioning machine that can continue to pay for third-party games. According to their own metric of success, they need that 25 million to grow significantly.
Correct.
And I don't see that happening in PC because the PC user base, convincing them to do a subservice where they own nothing is antithetical to everything we know about that user base. They, like, for example, look at Starfield's numbers on Steam. Early access, you got 250,000 people playing, and even higher than that after. Those folks didn't come to Game Pass for Starfield, and Starfield's like your flagship title. And so, and then if you look at the actual reviews on Xbox.com for Starfield, they're not very strong because I guess people on the PC front were having issues going through the Xbox store. It was like crashing. Right. And so the Steam users didn't seem to be having that issue. And then the Steam score is a 76%. So I look at this and think, I have no idea what Xbox has up their sleeve to convert PC users because that's their target. Phil even told the Brazilian regulators, we've pretty much plateaued on console. We've got room for growth on PC. How do you convince PC users, especially so many of them ingrained into Steam, how do you convince them to do a subservice where they do not own any of the games that are on the service?
I mean, didn't Phil say himself it's hard to measure what success is for the games? And
I haven't got there yet, yes.
Yeah. People look at that and say, that's idiotic, but pioneers of anything that we've had as Americans or just human race, when someone's the leader trying to do something, right? People don't believe it, or they're like, there's no way it's going to happen, right? And right now, and I'm not saying Phil's like a pioneer and he's leading the what I'm saying is they're doing something in this industry that has never been done at this caliber before. So they don't know, right? So they have to pay 300 million to Jedi Survivor. They have to pay 10 million for these other companies. They have to pay because they're trying to establish what this is. So the Tokyo Game Show they just had, they had multiple ads. Did you watch the Tokyo Game Show at all?
It was too early in the morning for me.
Okay. I watched it, and they had, I think, 3 or 4 commercials, ads, okay, while the Tokyo Game Show going off for PC Game Pass. Not for Game Pass, for PC Game Pass. They were pushing it hard. And all the games that were coming out, they even had a person come in front and said, all of these games are, in Japanese, in Japanese, they were saying all these games are coming to Game Pass. All these games are coming to Game Pass. Oh, and we're doing a special, 100 yen. If you're at the Tokyo Game Show and blah blah blah, you can join for 100 yen. So they were doing a special. They are pushing this hard to get that number up, right? Because they want that interaction. And this is the reason they bought Activision, and the reason they didn't go for another company, because they have PC base and they also have mobile base, and those two markets are huge overseas, and they're trying to capitalize on that, and that's why they're pushing all these JRPGs. That's why they're trying to push over in Japan. This is why they're trying to push on mobile. So there's ways for them to grow, and Game Pass, could it fail? Sure. Is it failing right now? No. It's in, I believe he said they're in single digits, right? And in profitability, okay, for Game Pass.
And that got misunderstood. He's talking about the margins are in single digits. I think somebody thought they were in single digits, like in the millions. He was saying because the margins, margins are in single digits. Yeah.
So they're making a profit, right? And Game Pass is what, 5 years old, right? It's about 5 years old.
Well, yeah, it was 2017. 2017, I think. I can't remember the exact date. I think it was 2017. Yeah.
So it's still in this infant state, right? Trying to figure out what they're doing with it and how many games they should bring to it and what games they should bring to it. Like, just jokingly, like if they, not to get exclusive, just if they put out $1 billion, we had this conversation on my stream. If they put $1 billion out and said Grand Theft Auto 6 day and date on Game Pass, would that be worth it? Right? Not that that's off PlayStation, not that it's off any other platform. It's just day and date on Game Pass. Would that bring enough growth for them to justify paying $1 billion? I don't know what the number. I'm just throwing a number out there. $1 billion to get Grand Theft Auto 6 on Game Pass, right? Are they crazy enough to do it? Maybe. Who knows? Right? But would that swing enough new users to come in and go, damn, I can come in and play Grand Theft Auto on Game Pass?
Right, and that's the sticking point. It has to be users that are not even on Xbox. Like they need, like the PC user base saying, "I want to play Grand Theft Auto, but instead of buying it for $60 in Steam, I'm going to save $50 so that I can play it and not own it." I think that is an incredibly hard sell. That's why I don't think this is sustainable.
A lot of people don't own the games at all anyway, though. You don't own your games anyway. On Steam? You're talking about Steam specifically. Yeah, you're talking about the PC users. Yeah.
I see Valve and Steam as a gargantuan-sized barrier to Microsoft's success on PC. I just don't see it. It's like the consumer base on PC will never, in the numbers that Phil wants to see. So let's just say in fiscal year 2030, they want to have 100 million subscribers to Game Pass.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And he wants the majority of those to be off of Xbox. So they'd either need to be in the cloud or on PC. So that's, at minimum, that's 51 to 55 million people. And I just don't understand.
Don't forget about the television sets now.
That's where I think...
And the cell phones.
Some of their private, not agreements, some of their private concessions and admissions that they've been constraining console to push cloud, I think maybe we're starting to understand why. Because I think PC is a closed door to them. I don't think they have room to grow there. I think the PC audience will say, no, I'll just buy the game for $60. Saving me $50 isn't worth me not owning the game and having to go to a separate storefront. The Steam user base doesn't even like to install a different launcher, let alone...
I know, just sliding the mouse over to the other button to push, right? They're like, I'm out.
I'm not doing it.
Yeah. How much of the how many I don't know off the top of my head, chat, look it up for me. How many people are gamers on PC? Right? Is it 100 mil? Is it 150 mil? Is it 200 mil? Like what is it? Is it a billion people? I have no idea.
Whatever the projections are, they're so convincing that at the same time we saw Capcom shift their attention to bring their games to PC, Sony did the same thing. So the projections for PC gaming is very healthy, and I think that's why Microsoft probably thinks, oh yeah, if we can get our ecosystem and Game Pass over there, we stand to profit.
Well, I think let's just say what percentage? Let's say there's 150 million extra people that are playing games on PC. Like what percentage? They need 2 million, 5 million, 10 million of just PC users to move that number up. And then there's the mobile devices for Game Pass that people can play on. I know people are laughing at that, right? But technology is moving faster and faster. Now you can play native games on the new iPhone that just came out. Then you could hook it up to a display and you can play the games. So now Apple technically is in the console wars, right? With their iPhone. Not that anyone's going to pay $1,200 for the phone to play games, but it's games there while you have a phone. But I don't want to jump ahead, but I think Nintendo could be a big thing for them, not because they want to buy them, but because they could do a deal with them where they get Game Pass on the next Nintendo device, right? And that would be a huge influx of people they could potentially get as well.
Yeah, I don't think that will ever happen because I
the
find
emails leaking.
No, Nintendo has their own sub-service they like to sell. I mean, for goodness sakes, I bought a Super Nintendo Classic controller, and I could only buy it if I was on their Nintendo Online subscription. And
but you would still buy that. They're not taking away from Nintendo stuff. You're still buying Nintendo stuff.
But the idea that if you boot up your Nintendo Switch and you see a competitive sub-service, especially one that's so good, like $10 for Game Pass, it's just insane. I don't see Nintendo wanting that on their platform, because whatever cut they get from that would not be enough to warrant having their competitor on their own console. I don't see that one happening. I've had a lot of people speculate that one, and I know Microsoft would love it, but I don't see it happening.
Wouldn't that also sell more Nintendo Switches for the people that just didn't want a Nintendo Switch because of the games, but now the new Nintendo Switch 2, whatever the hell it's going to be called, now plays more powerful games, right? Because supposedly the leaks, it's like PlayStation 4, whatever, better graphics on that device. And then now they could have a mobile device where they're playing games of Xbox on their portable device. People do it right now on PlayStation and Xbox or on their mobile phones. So
right. Again, I think the issue is Nintendo's model is massive hardware saturation, and then they never sell anything. No, their games are never on sale.
No.
And the quantity of sales, right? The quantity of sales is absurd. So I think it would be antithetical to their business strategy to say, okay, we're going to get massive hardware distribution, and a portion of the people that buy this can spend $10 that goes to Microsoft, and then they have a great reason to not really buy games. Like, look at especially if Nintendo looks at the revenue reports, like anytime there's sales reports, Microsoft lags significantly behind. Well, why? Well, Game Pass. Like, they've got a culture of people that are like, why would I buy a game? Like, I have a massive library of games that I don't have to buy. Like, the Xbox fans always trumpet and sing day and date, PlayStation and Nintendo over there ripping you off, and you got to pay for everything. We don't have to buy games. But then it's like, you just made yourself a very uncompelling consumer. Like, no one at that point thinks you're very worthy of paying attention to. You have no buying power as a consumer at that point, because you're basically saying, I penny pinch and don't buy. Now, I know people are going to be like, well, but the Game Pass users spend on average an extra $23 a year. That's where that came out of one of these leaks. And the problem with that stat is we don't know if that's a causal relationship to Game Pass or a correlating relationship, because people that buy subscriptions are tending to spend more money. I have Nintendo Online, and I tend to buy games and spend money on the Nintendo Switch. So that's a correlating data point. It doesn't mean that I spend more money on Switch because I have Nintendo Online. Like, I spend more money on Xbox because I have Game Pass. That could be a correlative data point simply because these are your most engaged users. The more engaged the user, the more they're likely to spend. So we don't know if there's a causal relationship there. So I don't even know if Nintendo would look at that and say, oh, well, if we put Game Pass on the Nintendo Switch, on average, Nintendo Switch users would then spend an extra $23 a year. These people are spending full price for games all the time on Nintendo.
Yeah, but wouldn't those people still spend all the money all the time on Nintendo? Like, Mario's on, you only can play it on Nintendo, right? It's not like they're going to be playing Game Pass and they're not going to ever play Mario again. They're playing Mario and they're like, oh, and there's Game Pass here, right? And Nintendo would get an additional whatever percentages, if it's 30%, 40%, whatever. They can name their price because Microsoft needs them. Nintendo doesn't need them. You know what I'm saying? Microsoft needs Switch. Nintendo does not need Microsoft.
I was just going there. Like, I think the real challenge is that the jig is up. Like, we can see your slip right now, Microsoft. Like, subscription services have plateaued. So you're selling something to Nintendo at that point that they know is not in high demand. They're like, why would I do that? You've stagnated at 25 million subs for a couple of years. So clearly the market is saying, this is not a high-in-demand product. It has plateaued. Therefore, we don't want to hitch our wagon to it. We don't want to be attached to a plateaued offer. We sell Mario. We sell Zelda, and we make insane amounts of money. The last thing we want to do is attach ourselves to a submodel that is stagnating and has plateaued. Not only that, it's a submodel that heavily relies on third party. And Nintendo's thinking, we don't need that. Like, we have some of the biggest first party names in history. You got Mario and you got Pokemon. That kind of settles the issue for them as far as revenue. I mean, even Phil himself said they're sitting on a pile of cash. They just don't need to do that. So as we kind of stay in the lane of Game Pass, we've kind of talked about the leaks, the projections to year 2030. We've talked about the price to bring games to Game Pass, the sustainability of Game Pass. Do you see the language that he used about by 2030, we want most of our users off hardware? What do you think that means for the future of Xbox with respect to hardware? Because there's been that speculation of we're done, because within these leaks were some leaks about hardware. I don't want to talk about the controllers and the digital stuff just yet. I want to know what you think about Microsoft's future in hardware, because this really seems to indicate hardware is not a priority long term for them at all.
No, I've been saying this for years. I think that they're trying to go all cloud, all digital. They're all trying to get rid. I don't think consoles are going to go away completely. I think Microsoft goes the route of, obviously, by the leaks, their next mid-gen upgrade, which is not, it's a refresh, is they're taking the disk drive away from the X, right? If that's what they're doing, and if it comes out. So there's no more disk drive. So that means you're in their ecosystem, right? 100% in their ecosystem. You can't go to GameStop anymore. You can't go to Best Buy or Target to pick up a game and put it in, right? They're still there because people have, like you have, I have, we still have the disk drive that we can, so they need to keep that for a couple years. But then the next gen console comes out, right? Do they put a disk drive in there? Do they just leave it where it's just diskless the entire time? And now you can only buy the digital games, and that's it. 100% digital games now in the future, which they tried to do 10 years ago, right? With the Kinect and whatnot. They tried to put digital games, and everyone pushed back, and here we are 10 years later, and now they're doing the exact same thing. Well, technically it would be 20 years later by the time it comes out. But now they're coming out with no hardware whatsoever. Now you have a little box like a Chromecast or the Fire Stick in the back of your television set. Is that considered a console? Not really. It's just a thumb drive, right? That you put in, and it's accessing their servers or whatnot, right? Look at the iPhone 15, right? Now it can play native games on the cell phone, right? So that's a console moving forward, right? From here up point, everyone's like, I'm not going to play on my phone. Okay, great. You also do social media, watch YouTube, make email documents, whatever. You watch full-length feature films on your cell phone on the small little screen. Who's to say they're not going to play video games, right? And then you have to look at the culture that we're old. We are ancient in this market compared to your son, your daughter, my son, everyone else's children that are used to these smaller screens, used to the tablets, used to the cell phones, right? And that is where they're pushing for games, because now you have 3.5 billion cell phones out there. Well, that number goes up because how many kids you have? You have 2, right? I know two. Ginger's got like 5, right?
He's got a whole soccer team, yeah.
Yeah, he's got a whole soccer team, right? There's other people that have I have 1, right? So that's now I have 2 cell phones in the house, but now I have 3, right? You're gonna have 4 cell phones in the house, and it's just gonna keep getting massive and up in scale. So I think that's where Xbox goes. I think that's where Microsoft goes. Hence why they said years ago, we're not competing with Sony, we're competing with Amazon, we're competing with Google, and Google has Android devices. And just like this, Android, Google, they're not in the gaming market right now. But instantaneously, all of a sudden, they have all these cell phones out there, and now all those cell phones can play natively games that can run right on their software as well going in the future. So I think it just goes towards cell phones. It goes towards PCs. It goes through the cloud.
Well, and that's a great segue to the other big leak, was the hardware leak. And this is obviously, I think, the most damaging of the leaks. I think the Nintendo leak with Phil Spencer, which we'll get to that, I think that one was kind of damaging. But I think the hardware leak was pretty damaging, because you see their entire plan, you see when they're trying to time it, there's literal breakdowns of the actual internals and hardware. Like, we know the architecture, okay? Phil Spencer obviously tweets, and he's like, these plans change, I can't wait to share the real plan. I first just want to talk about the mid-gen refresh before we get into, there's like a hybrid cloud device and a haptic controller. I really am excited to see all the Xbox guys that hated on haptic feedback to suddenly have to try to celebrate it. Anyway, so let's just talk about this this mid-gen refresh. It's not really a mid-gen refresh. It's going to be a digital
terabyte of storage. That's it. It's more friendly to the ecosystem.
Oh my gosh. I know this just makes me look like a hater, but come on, man. It's a digital Series X, and it might not even be out next year. So I don't understand this at all. Now, again, this could be a hypothetical, like Phil's saying, we can't wait to share the real plan, because there's a very good possibility we're looking at a Nintendo Switch 2 next year that's going to blow everybody away. The rumors are this thing was at Gamescom running Zelda at 60, running the Matrix demo. DLSS is just blowing folks away, okay? With less power, they're getting crazy performance out of this thing. There's also a very good possibility that we're looking at a PS5 Pro holiday 4th quarter next year. And Xbox stands to, at right now, it seems, they stand to not have any hardware push next year at all. They have a Series S with a larger hard drive. And then there's this digital Series X that might show up next year or might show up after. What's the optics on this for the consumer? You know, you're going to the store and you're like, all right, it's time to get me a console. What do you think of this situation for Xbox? Because this very much, I think this is pretty bad for them for next year, especially.
I mean, it's pretty ballsy to just kind of keep exactly with the same, right? You're just like, hey, we're gonna add more storage to the unit. It doesn't do anything more, doesn't do anything less. It's just more storage, and it's eco-friendly, right? It's got, you know, it heats more of the standards there. The controller's an upgrade, right? As far as, are they in trouble? I don't think they are, because I think, again, Phil has said that it's about Game Pass, right? Game Pass is the thing. The box is not the thing. So the only reason they listen to the consumers saying, hey, the S has got too little storage, so they came out with a bigger storage. And then people are like, hey, I would like the X with more storage. And they're like, all right, here you go. Here's the X with more storage, right? But no upgrade as far as graphical or anything like that. It's just more storage. So I think you looking at it, okay, and obviously I know you're an Xbox guy originally, right? But you lean more towards PlayStation because you're enjoying more of the games and stuff that come to PlayStation. Not that because you're more PlayStation because of the business sense, right? You're more because of the games and stuff that they're delivering. They told you what they're giving to you, and in your words, they didn't lie to you, right? Where Xbox, they did lie. And I have an Xbox Series X, and I said on previous shows, if they came out with another system, even after this refresh, I'm not buying the refresh. There's no I can just go buy a hard drive and stick it in the back of the one I already have. So I'm not buying this to upgrade. And then if they come out with the next one, I'm not buying it day one, year one, because if they tell me it does this, this, and this, and then all of a sudden I hear it doesn't do this, this, and this, then I'm not picking it up, right? So they've burned me as a consumer. I'm just gonna wait and see, right? I've said in the past that I might even go towards more PC games than Xbox games because of Game Pass, and I think that's by plan. They want to keep it low grade and keep it. When I say low grade, I don't want that blown out of proportion. What I'm saying is they're just keeping it. They're not doing the competition with tit for tat with PlayStation, right? They're just taking the system, maintaining what it is, giving more storage for the people that want the system, but they're still just selling Game Pass, man. They're staying on that track. They don't care about anything else. They're just like, yeah, we have a box, but we're still staying with Game Pass. And I think the way they shock people and compete is by putting more third-party games and finally getting their first-party games onto Game Pass. That's how they compete.
I think the dilemma here is that the predictions right now for hardware sales in August is 3-1. So the 2-to-1 ratio PS5 to Series X is now turning into a 3-to-1. The gap is just widening, which is obviously, that's a huge concern, because I understand what you're saying. You're like, well, that's a part of the plan. That's a part of the plan. So then my question would be, what's the consumer adoption point? What is it? Because if it's not hardware, if you're not getting me to buy in with your hardware, like look at what Nintendo Switch has pulled off. PlayStation 5, even PlayStation 4 saturation is insanely good, and now the 5 is on pace to outpace it. So if Xbox is, if the catalyst, if the conversion point's no longer hardware, then what is it? Because I don't even see games. Like, we can't, what are you going to get people in with Redfall? I don't even see you getting in people with Starfield now, because as soon as the dust settles on Starfield, it's got a 76 on Steam. That's not driving people in droves to Game Pass. There's simply no way. Right. Now, initially it might have, but Game Pass, according to Phil's own words, its oxygen is content. Like, it needs engagement. The only way you get engagement is content. And then the more engagement you get, the more content you need. So if what you're saying is true, and they're not bothered by this at all, they're like, yeah, that's fine. If the gap between PS5 and Series X and S is widening to a 3-to-1, and at this pace, it'll widen to a 4-to-1. It will.
Didn't they end up the last console? It was 3-to-1. Wasn't PlayStation 4 3-to-1?
I think at the I don't remember at the end it couldn't have been, because wasn't
it was 80? I think it's like 82 to 122. Yeah, so it's not.
Yeah. It wasn't. There were I think there were times where the sales in an individual month.
Yeah, that's what it was.
But I think grand total it wasn't that extreme. This is becoming more extreme. This is, in my mind, it's a little bit more of a dire situation. It's like, oh my gosh, like, what's the adoption point for the consumer then? Like, what are you going to do in fast forward in 2 years when the PlayStation 5 and the Nintendo Switch, like, they're the dominant market of console. So they've got the consumer. At that point, you have to admit, you've lost consumers to them. You have. Like, if you're selling less than you did last gen, they're selling more. It stands excuse me. It stands to reason they're getting folks from you.
Right.
So then what's the conversion point? How are you going to get these people to come to the Xbox ecosystem? Because I don't see it being third-party deals for Game Pass. It's got to be insanely good first-party games at that point.
See, I look at it differently. I don't think it has to be insanely good first-party titles. I don't think that's what... I joke on my channel, right? If it's an 80, it's a trash game now, right? That's what society has sustained now, right? Like Ghost of Tsushima is a phenomenal game, right? 83, right? And that's a phenomenal game. But yet Starfield is an 84 on Metacritic, which is 1 point higher on Metacritic, okay, is 1 point higher than Ghost of Tsushima, and it's a trash game, right? So the persona of what the internet does, what games are awesome and what games aren't, is like here nor there, right? It's the bottom line of how many people interact with the game. And I think Microsoft is looking at, they don't need to make, is it nice that a game can come out and sell 10 million copies? Sure, right? Like Nintendo all day, first party title, 10, 20, 30 million copies sold for their first party titles. When PlayStation releases it, they get that initial 3 to 5 million right when it comes out, and then it ends up selling 10 to 15 million copies, 20 million copies for their first party titles. Xbox, not so much. They're at that 6 million point, right? And then 10 million long term or whatnot. So they're below the other two as far as first party. Now, not all first parties. Obviously, some go higher than others. So I think that they're okay where they're at, and they just need to make games in the middle of the road. And I said this multiple times in the past shows. PlayStation does the high end gaming. They have their clientele. They do this, high end controllers, high end VR. They have that. They know their market. Nintendo knows their market, right? It's 0 to death, as I say. They hand you a Nintendo when you're born, and you turn it back in when you die. Okay, they have their market, and they have their first-party titles. Xbox doesn't really have that. So Xbox's thing is Game Pass, and I'll keep banging the Game Pass drum, not because I like it, it's because this is what they're pushing, and I think they're okay with me. I just watched, not mediocreness, but they're middle of the road, 80s, high 70s, 80s, and the amount of people come over. If they come out with a Keystone, that price point that they said they couldn't get, right? If that comes down to a price point, let's say it's $150. You don't think people would buy that regardless of the power of it or not, just to have? They're like, oh yeah, I travel, I'll pick it up and I'll bring it with me. You don't think people would pick it up? I mean, people used to pick up the Chromecast. They used to pick up Apple TV because of the little box. They're like, yeah, it's the little box. You just plug it into your television set, right? Now you have the console anywhere and it's portable, right? I see them going that market. Just flood the market. Play it on phone. Play it on PC. Play it on the mobile device, on the Keystone, on the console. That's what they do. They don't care about massive sales because they're making their money. As Microsoft as a company as a whole, they're making money everywhere else. This is just a small division of Xbox. So I don't think they need to make what Sony's making. I don't think they need to make what Nintendo's making. They're still making money. They just don't need to make that much money what those companies are doing.
Yeah, we got some clarification on the sales last gen. I was going to say 50 million. The Xbox landed around 50 million versus like the 120 at PlayStation. So it actually was above a 2-to-1 ratio.
Okay, so it was.
So it's on pace this time to be worse.
They only sold 50 million Xbox Ones.
That's what chat was saying. Like I don't know if we can. We could do Xbox One total sales. Obviously we got to get speculations from Google. Google speculating according to VG charts 57.9, so close to 60 million. So
Jesus.
and if that's close to 60
million,
I guess
it was the 360 that sold 80 million then.
I believe that the 360 was sort of the height of Xbox.
It was like 82 or 88, something like that.
Yeah, and on the subject of Ghost of Tsushima. Ghost of Tsushima has an 83 from the outlets, but out of 21,000 user score, it has a 9.1. So that to me is compelling to who matters, like the consumer.
Sure, but what I'm saying is the Metacritic score from critics is an 83, and people are like, that's a trash. The point I'm making is
sure.
IGN says a 7 or whatever, and they're like, that's a trash game. Another game is like 1 point lower, 1 point higher, and it's not a trash game. That's all I was saying.
I was actually going to Steam for a particular reason, because if you're trying to compel PC users to convert, if your best offering is a 76 according to the consumer, that you're not winning people. And as you said, they're going to get all these 8s, like 7 and 8 games out there. Are 7 and 8s going to create an adoption rate? Like that's, and I don't think so.
For that price point, you know what I'm saying? For that price point, it might.
Yeah, I just continue to think you have too many hurdles. You have the lack of ownership. It's not in Steam, so they don't get any of their achievements. It's not in the library. They do not own the game. They have to pay a subscription fee. And beyond that, I don't think Microsoft's first-party offerings are going to be good enough. I don't think so. I don't think you're going to win people over with Fable or Hellblade.
So then, do
or
they
Avowed.
win people? Do they win people over with the third-party, where they bring in big third-party games, and now you're not paying, that customer's not paying $70. They're just paying that $10 to play it and then put it down when they're done.
I think you're working against consumer behavior that's already set. I think that's the problem. They're working against a buy-to-play market, and the buy-to-play market will be, I think we already see hesitancy in their own consumer base to do that.
Yeah, but we had the same problem with movies in the beginning, right? We had a problem where people were just buying, and now they weren't really renting, right? That's the way the Blockbuster went out of date and Netflix took over, because now you're just kind of renting the movie. You're not buying it anymore, and now you're just streaming it, right? So they've completely changed the landscape of movies anymore. Now you don't even own movies anymore. There's a very small percentage of people that own the movies anymore. Now they just rent it or pay a subscription model to watch it.
But even in those realms, those subscription models are plateauing. I think that's the general.
Sure.
That's the challenge, is that if you root your business strategy around submodel, you're facing a lot of challenges.
Yeah, but you're also looking at the submodel where Netflix is 20 years in and Xbox is in 6, right? So if Netflix hit their saturation point and now they're trying to block people that are sharing passwords, and because their saturation point is like 200 and something million, right? And they need to get that up higher, so they have to raise the price. They got to hunker down. Game Pass is not even in. They're not even in the same ballpark. They're literally 10 to 15 years behind the movie industry as far as streaming goes, right? Game Pass is now what Netflix was back in the early 2000s.
But it's plateaued faster. That's the concern.
I think it plateaued faster because obviously more people watch movies than they played video games. Video games now, though, has more people playing video games right now than ever before. And moving forward, there's going to be more people playing video games than ever before. That number's not going to go down. That number's going to increase.
Well, that's the question then, because Netflix was sort of the early adopter. They had early adopter advantage. There was no Disney Plus. There was no massive Amazon Prime library. There was no Hulu, right? They had the early adoption advantage. The difficulty now, I think, would be everybody's doing it. Nintendo has their sub service. PlayStation has their sub service. And then Xbox has theirs. And then you have Steam just sort of over there being like, we don't do that. We don't do that. You buy the game, and I actually think Steam has the healthiest relationship with the consumer, because you can refund the game if you're like, yeah, I played it for an hour and I don't like it. I actually think Steam has the literal best relationship to consumer in the market, which means you're going to have a hard time cracking that nut. Like, those people are not going to come over to a subservice because they're like, I can play a game for an hour and a half and return it if I don't like it. I don't need your subservice. I don't need to be like, oh, I can get Jedi Survivor for free, because I can buy Jedi Survivor. And if it's bad, crap, or buggy, I can return it and get my money back.
Real quick, Eugene, Netflix literally started in 1997. 10 years after, in 2007 is when they put the digital market out there, where people started renting movies digitally. So, yeah, it's not 20 years, but they're still 15 years ahead of what the streaming service did.
I think the concern would be is across the board, PlayStation has stopped putting out their numbers for PS Plus, and they're raising the price. Xbox raised their price. Disney Plus, everybody did that, because I think across the board we're seeing that those subservices have plateaued. So
Sure.
At that point, you're facing a market-wide behavior, and Xbox has to consider, how do we overcome that? So they have market behavior on PC and the Steam user base, but they now have also market-wide behavior. What do you do with your TV services? You probably do the same thing I do. You bounce around now, don't you? Like, you get one.
I don't have cable, and yeah, if we're interested in the show, we subscribe the show, or we have Disney Plus only because we paid like 2 years in advance because it was a deal. So that's coming to a close soon, and they're raising the price double. So we're not going to be subscribing to that anymore.
But what you would do, I would imagine, as a Star Wars fan, if the right show hits, you would wait,
You wait,
buy, binge, cancel.
That's correct.
So Game Pass is going to face the same market reality.
Correct, but this is why I said in the beginning of the show, they only need people to stay in the service for 4 months. You see what I'm saying? They don't need a person to stay in for 12. They only need a new user to come in for 4. And if they have someone that keeps coming back and then plays for it later, they can do that.
How does your graph grow in that reality? How? That's tough.
I mean, the graph doesn't really grow. It stays. And this is what I was talking about yesterday on my stream. Someone said, is Game Pass going to fail? I said it potentially could. But at the same time, as long as they keep that number gradually going up, as long as they're not spending more than they're getting in, they'll be fine to maintain.
Oh, I think they are spending more than they're putting in right now. I think it's a loss lead. I think the idea...
But I think you have to in the beginning of your business, right?
Oh, for sure.
Just like any business, you got to do that in the beginning of it to build up that clientele, to build up that market. Yeah.
And that's the question then. If this is loss lead, what's the tipping point to profitability, and have they gotten there yet? Because if 25 million isn't it, and it stays at this plateau for another couple of years, I feel like that's a make or break decision, not to leave the business, but I believe Game Pass at that point would have to be completely reevaluated.
They got to do something, as long as like a different tier, different. Maybe if you do Ultimate, maybe you get the early access automatically. Maybe if you get more discount, instead of 10%, maybe you get 15%. They got to do something to bring you in. Like, how does a store bring you into the store? They put something on sale, brings you in, and then you might buy a television set, or you might buy, something else while you're there. For one thing, you leave with another type of thing. I don't know. And
Mike, I think this entire time you've held on to this keystone and this leak about the hybrid. That's a bit of a moment for you, I think, because I was like, they're never going to do it. They can't get the price down. They basically said a while ago that they kind of pulled the plug on this thing, but now we're seeing from these leaks, they want a hybrid console for under $100.
Yeah, I've called this. I've said this for literally multiple years.
My question to you is that really a hybrid console? For under $100, it's not much of a hybrid, right? It's just a cloud dongle.
It's just a cloud. It's a Fire Stick. It's exactly what I've been saying it's going to be. It's a Chrome Stick. It's a Fire Stick. It's a thing that you plug into the back of your television and then just beam the content to your television set. That's it.
So let's say that happens. If that's their offer, what does that even look like if you can go to the store and you can buy a Nintendo Switch 2,
$100 and $100 for the year for Game Pass, or $120 for the lowest tier. Right.
My thought is, if users are not responding or converting or adopting in the right amount of numbers for the, hey, it's $10 for Game Pass, right? What's $100 for the, we'll call it the Keystone. The worry then I would have is I still don't think you're going to get the good market adoption, because this is a leisure market. The report came out that most of the people dumping money into the gaming ecosystem are earning over $100,000 a year. That's not the kind of person that goes to the store and is like, give me your cheapest piece of hardware. So this would be then marketed to the mass non-gaming market.
Yeah, someone going by, they're walking down the store, and they're like, $100. I'll take that. With 3 months free. 3 months free with Game Pass. You know what I'm saying? You buy the $100, 3 months of free of Game Pass, because they only need you to stay for 4. So you get the 3, and then you like it, and you're like, oh, you know what? I really liked my time on Game Pass for 3 months. Let me stay on, right?
Right. Like at that point, you're hoping for mass market appeal at that low entrance cost. Like, you'd be the only gaming hardware piece of equipment. You'd be the only one at the store at that price point. Nobody'd be close to you at that point.
And you're not spending a lot of money developing that, right? You know what I'm saying? You're not losing a crap ton of money putting a dongle in a box, right? There's no moving parts. There's no nothing that could break or anything. You're just giving a dongle, and people plug it into their television set.
If they do this, there was also talk about a controller that does this. Like, you just go to the store and buy the controller, and it connects to the cloud. Okay.
Yep.
If they do this, do you not? What are your thoughts then on their presence in the market with respect to high-powered hardware? What presence do they have, if any, in that sector of the market? Like, PS5 6 is sitting there on the shelf, and maybe there's even a pro version of the Nintendo Switch 2, and they're like, we have a $100 dongle and a controller. We don't do the high power. Or do you think they still have something? Do you think they still have like the 2-tiered system they have now with a Series Y and a Series Z?
I think there will always be a console. I just think the consoles will be less. It'll be like the person that buys records, right? Like, I don't think record players are being thrown off the shelf. People are going out and buying record players, right? But record players are still there for people that want to listen to records. So I think that people that still want to have a console in their house and have it plugged in, and they want the 4K or whatever it is, okay? You guys think I'm not making economical sense, but everything I've said, and you guys don't watch me, you watch Lono, which is fine, okay? But I've said some crazy shit in the past, pardon my French, okay? And it's all come to fruition. So you can make fun of me all you want, and I say some outlandish stuff. So I'm telling you, that's where the industry's going. You don't have to believe me, but when you're playing on the cell phone and just start laughing because you'd be like, man, that crazy guy on the internet was correct.
I don't know how anybody can doubt what you're saying with this new iPhone and its power and what they're talking about. And that's just now. Like, think what cell phones are going to look like in 5 years. They got a phone now that'll be able to play some games. And people are like, yeah, it probably won't run so good. Okay, just hold on a minute. Fast forward 5 years. So this thing is a catalyst into a new era. And Mike has he has held the line, as it were, on the Keystone. He's like, that Keystone's coming. And I've just thought, there's no way. They scrapped it. And now they're talking about a hybrid console, a controller. You know, the one question that they got about this is like, are you going to stick to the, hey, this is the console, hey, build for the console only? And the guy said, we already started that journey with the Series X and the Series S and the One X and the One.
Yeah,
like, we already started that journey. But he did say we need to have more flexibility, but we also need to let creators harness hardware abilities. Do you think he's touching on parity there and saying, if we go with the two-tiered system again, we kind of need to let people leverage power if it's available? Because I don't feel like that's happening right now with the Series X.
Yeah, they need to, if they're going to do that, do exactly what they showed in the graph. Like, let this come out first, let it breathe a little bit, and then release the bigger one and whatnot. Let it take the market, right? That document said 2030. We're in 20. I know we're 7 years away, right, from what they said, right? Or 6.5. I said, what, 2 weeks ago? I said 6 years it goes to cloud gaming, and everyone's like, no. And then this projection is it's all cloud gaming by the basically the time of 2030 comes around, right?
Now, when you make that prediction, are you talking specifically like that's where Microsoft goes, or you think the market goes there?
I think the market, the industry, is bigger, largely more in cloud gaming than it is in physical console sales.
I want some meat on this. Are you saying the majority? Well, it's kind
majority
of hard
of people.
The majority of gamers right now are mobile gaming anyway.
Majority of people that play games will be playing through the cloud instead of putting something on their actual disc.
It's hard. It's hard because the majority of gamers right now are in the mobile market. Like, they're the lion's share. So I guess you'd get to claim all those people to a certain degree, would you not? Well, maybe not, because a lot of mobile gaming would be native to the device itself, not necessarily on the cloud.
Right.
You're thinking essentially remoting in and playing a game on a cloud device. You think that will be the majority? Is that what you're saying? Or you're saying it'll be larger?
No, it will be the largest of all the things that are happening.
Okay.
Yeah, it will be the largest.
I think the mobile chips that we're seeing in the iPhone might make that hard to quantify, because there'll be so many people playing on a mobile device and actually playing on the hardware itself. But then there'll be games that kind of do both. Like, we know there are games that are going to throw certain elements of the game on the cloud, and then certain elements will be running native. It'll be like a game that kind of runs hybrid, kind of like what a dedicated server is when you're playing online. So I think because you would get to count all those mobile users, you're probably correct, because you get to inherit all those people in your stat. And you can say, look, any game they play that touches the cloud shows that, like, my prediction was correct. I don't think that Sony and Nintendo do that in the next, 6 years or whatever. I think that trajectory is a lot larger. I think it's more of a 15-year
right. Well, I don't think
trajectory.
Nintendo and Sony have to compete with that, right? They have their market, and they're okay with the 150 million, 200 people that buy a PlayStation, or 150 million to 200 people that buy a Switch, right? They're okay with that market. They're very successful at what they're doing. That's not what Microsoft is aiming for. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They're not trying to, again, Phil's words, not mine, even though I said it way before Phil even said it. I said they're not even competing with them anymore. They're looking ahead, because big conglomerate companies need to keep breathing, okay? And we look at it as Xbox versus PlayStation, and Microsoft is the head of the beast, okay? Microsoft and Amazon and Google are the big guys who can own and dominate everything in the future. That's where they're trying to go. It's not Xbox trying to dominate the world. It's Microsoft trying to dominate the world, and Xbox is just part of that little plan to get into people's houses and whatnot, right? Xbox wanted to make a set-top box years ago, and they failed. And now they got you into
TV.
Right. Okay. I mean, cell phones, they wanted to put a camera on your phone, and you're like, no, I don't want that. But now they're handing you phones with cameras and high def stuff, and we're all adopting it. No problem. Right. Tracking devices and everything. They'll get in, and then they'll start doing other things with it. So
I think the silver lining here would be, because we're going to get to, some of the Nintendo stuff here in a minute that I debated this morning. But I think some of the silver lining here would be infrastructure would have to improve. Sure. So Microsoft, they have the war chest, the influence. They probably even have a good level of influence governmentally, especially here in America.
Sure.
That our infrastructure would have to improve, because they would say, listen, we can't do this if the internet in the suburbs sucks. We can't do this if the internet in major cities across America are woefully behind the rest of the globe. So our infrastructure would hopefully get some pretty heavy investments, because the city that I live in, I moved into my house 3 years ago, and I had a technician tell me there was a 5-year build order for fiber in our city. We're 3 years in and nothing, right?
They haven't started. Yeah.
I'm still on old copper lines.
Yep.
I'm still on speeds that I could have got 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. We haven't gotten any of that investment in the infrastructure. The internet companies consolidated and just gave the consumers the finger. And we're like, yeah, we were going to invest in this massive fiber network, and we're just kind of not going to do that because there's no competition to force them to. So I think the silver lining of what your prediction is, I still think your timeline's a little short for the majority. I think your timeline's correct for Microsoft and Xbox, but I think it's a little too short for everybody else.
For the industry.
Yeah, for the industry. I think industry adoption at the level that you're talking about would take a little bit longer, like more of like a 10 to 15 year. Wheezy's kind of saying similar things. He's saying 15 to 20 years. But I think along the way, the good thing would be is that Microsoft would push for infrastructure to be changed and updated, because it's kind of like our public transport infrastructure in America. The lack of good trains. Just the lack of good trains is like, what are we doing? And I think some of that's because we urbanized too early, and there's been sort of some studies into this, that the cities, the locations across the globe that are now urbanizing are way more advanced than we are, because they get to build everything from the ground up. So it's like their public transport's better, their internet's better, their electric's better, because they're urbanizing
they learn their lessons from the other
right.
one. Yeah.
They're like, well, we're going to urbanize in the 21st century, and we get to learn from everything else. And we're sitting here saying like, man, these train tracks were built like 90 years ago. So it's like we're facing some of those dilemmas, especially with we're using copper phone lines for internet. Like, that's insane to me that we're still doing that.
At least you're in better shape, because I have fiber 100 feet away from me, and I can't get it. I live right on the border of a county, and the county that I'm in has a monopoly of its spectrum, right? And AT&T is 100 feet. The node is literally on my phone pole outside of my neighborhood, and they can't run it to my house.
That's like sitting out.
They can't run that to my house.
You're like the poor kid in the Christmas movie, like,
yeah, exactly.
Looking through the glass. You're like, I want that.
I'm breathing on the window. There it is.
Can't have it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so frustrating. We had a power outage for, I think it was like 36 hours, and the people across the street still had power. Like, it was so frustrating. It's like, how is this possible? Like, what is happening? What world do we live in? I can't imagine it being internet, because that's even worse. Like, every day you go by that phone pole, and you got to live with that reality.
It mocks me. Yeah, it mocks me. I drive up, I look at it, and I give it that look. I'm like, damn.
You just snap one day and chop it down. They're like, what are you doing, sir? Local man in prison for chopping down a phone pole. So in this week of, this is leak week. I think this is going to be kind of a historic.
Is that what it's going to be every year? Leak week?
No. I think we're going to look back and say that was leak week. Like, we got a lot of info, okay? We got the hardware scoop. We got info. Just the bargaining power that Microsoft kind of gave away by saying, here's what it costs to bring games to Game Pass. Every third-party company looks at that now and says, okay, we know what you're willing to give people to come to Game Pass. Like,
right.
They've lost a lot of bargaining power there.
I want $1 billion.
Yeah. And to me, the juiciest steak on the table was that email from Phil Spencer about Nintendo. I was like, this is it. This is an insight into how this man views the market. He thinks a monopolistic merger would be a career moment for him, right? Acquiring or merging with a direct competitor. This guy's like, that would be career moment. And he says, we're playing the long game. Like, what did you think of this email in particular? Because there were a lot of people hand-waving this. Like, that's just business. I was like, no, it's not. That's a direct... Nintendo's their competitor. They're direct competition. And Microsoft's like, oh, I can't wait to get our teeth into them.
I looked at it as like what Bob Iger did with Disney. Like his feather in his cap was to get Marvel and to get Star Wars. You know what I mean? And then he got his white whale. And now look at what's happening to Disney. But he got what he had. Basically, he took all the stuff that they wanted. He got Fox. He got Marvel. He got those major IPs. I kind of looked at it when I first read it as that is what Phil Spencer's looking at, right? Like that's his white whale. That's his feather in his cap. When his career is over, he's like, yeah, I got that to happen. I put that here. But when it was like talking about the hostile takeover and the head guy and they're looking to do it, like he doesn't want to do that, but Microsoft does. You see what I'm saying? Like right. Phil himself doesn't want to do a hostile takeover, but Microsoft's like, yeah, we're okay with it, right? Like they're okay doing it, and he's the CEO, right? So I look at it and go, look, this is back in 2020 when they were taking these. So you have to look at it as, okay, we got $1 trillion to blow. Who we buying? And they're looking at like, all right, let's go down the rabbit hole here. Well, we can get Nintendo, we can get Valve. Those we would cover our mobile market, and that would cover our PC market. And then they're like, well, there's also Activision, who has PC and mobile. And they're like, let's go for Activision instead, right? And then we'll go for ZeniMax, and we'll pick up Bethesda. I don't think actively right now they're trying to buy Nintendo. I think Phil, in his head, that's his goal at the end. That's the way I take it, right? Now, obviously, in the emails back in 2020, 100%, he's like, yeah, I want Nintendo, right? Daddy, I want Nintendo. And Microsoft's like, settle down, boy, right? We're not getting that, right? Like that's the way I look at it. And he's like, we'll play the long game. And this is why I said that they're already made a 10-year deal for the next Nintendo to get Call of Duty games on Nintendo, right? They were already making deals with Nintendo, with Activision after this whole thing. But now these leak. So does Nintendo look at it and go, did Nintendo know about these things happening? I would assume they did. But now they see this email, it's like shocker to them. They're like, oh yeah, they were trying to buy us. I think in businesses like this, they pick up a phone and they go, hey, we'll give you $2 trillion. They're like, yeah, no. And they're like, all right, we'll call back with the right number, right? Yeah. That's the way I feel like they do this, right? So I don't think Nintendo saw this email and was like, oh, I am so pissed at right? I don't think they're doing that, right?
Stop it.
I don't think they're doing that, right? I think that it is what it is. It was one on the table. It's not on the table anymore. And I don't think they're going to buy Nintendo. But this is why I think they might deal with Nintendo, put Game Pass on the Switch, and not try to buy Nintendo.
Well, they did. So this was in 2020. So he's like actively talking to somebody that's, buying shares. And he's like, this might give us an opportunity. And in 2021 and in 2022, Nintendo did some share buyback. And the company that he references only has like less than 2% now. So I do think at some level, we don't know if Nintendo did that in direct responses, but it seems like Nintendo was kind of like, hey, wait a minute. We gotta keep an eye on this. The other thing to consider is that Nintendo now knows that there's a long game here. Like he literally says, I don't think hostile takeover would be a good move, so we're playing the long game. But I stand on this, right? the conjunction of that next sentence is but. So he's completing the thought. He's like, me and the board of directors, we're ready if there's an opportunity that arises here.
It's a business.
Right. Microsoft, you honestly think if Microsoft has an opportunity for a Nintendo hostile takeover, do you think Microsoft would be like, no, we don't want to do that. We've done enough, monopolistic competition killing for no, this is their legacy. Okay. This is their legacy of get rid of the competition, remove consumer choice, be the only game in town. That's Microsoft's calling card. So you can sit here and be like, well, Phil Spencer said it's not a good move. And it's like, do you honestly think he or Microsoft would sit idly by? And my point was, I could sit here and say, man, I'd love to live in a bigger house. But if I'm checking my phone every day and I'm staying in touch with the realtor, it's not that aspirational. I'm keeping tabs on, okay, I'm going to do this if an opportunity comes up. He actually wants Nintendo. Like he would. And as a gamer, I found more troubling than his email was there were people who were like, that'd be great to have a Microsoft buy a direct competitor. Like as a consumer, where do you stand on that? If that announcement hits tomorrow, where are you on the Richter scale of panic or anger or happiness?
I don't like consolidation, right? 100 feet away from me is fiber. Okay. Spectrum has a lockdown on the stuff, and I don't want one company owning all the other companies because that's what happens, and then things don't evolve. Not to say that would it stifle Nintendo? I mean, Xbox, every time they buy someone, there's like, we're hands off. I don't think they would touch to try to manipulate Nintendo to try to change what Nintendo's core values are. But I do think they would try to shove as much Microsoft stuff onto that device. I don't want them to buy them. And I don't think they're on the table. Not to say they're never on the table. I think anyone has a price. I mean, look at Bungie. Right? Before they bought Bethesda, we found out that Microsoft made another bid towards Bungie, and they wanted like $7 billion. And they said, no, we're not paying that. Right? And then they paid $7 billion for Bethesda, which I think was a better move than paying $7 billion for Bungie. Right? Well, that helped Sony because now when they bought Bethesda, Sony was like, hey, we'll buy Bungie. And they weren't worth $7 billion because the market said, no. Bethesda has all these different companies, all these different publishers. Bungie's just Bungie. They have, what it is. So they got them for half the price. They got them for, what was it, 3.5 or 3.8, whatever the hell it was. So Microsoft did Sony a solid by not paying $7 billion for Bungie back in the day, and now they got it for $3 billion. So I think that they shouldn't buy them. I don't think unless the future beholds where Amazon and Google all of a sudden and Apple all of a sudden are in the gaming market, right? Because right now it's Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. But within a blink of an eye, now you have these cell phones coming out that can play video games, and they're going to take the same technology, whatever, and put it on the tablets and whatnot for Apple, and then Google's going to follow suit, right? So now all of a sudden, Google and Apple are now in consoles, right? They're in the console wars again, but in a different realm. So I think that's what Microsoft is afraid of. Right now, they're in third. They could be sixth. Do you know what I mean?
Oh man, I mean, I think I'm not like scared it's going to happen because I trust that the Japanese government would probably be like, absolutely not. Like, no, because Nintendo is too endemic to our economy.
Yeah, but they're not on the list of protection though. They're not on the list of 1,500 companies that are on that list.
They're on the second tier that still requires governmental approval.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's not an automatic block.
Correct. It's not. They can't buy them at all. They can. Yeah. They can still purchase them, but they have to do a lot of smooth talking and whatnot to get them.
I think getting past Japanese government would be really tough. Secondly, absolutely. Getting past the rest of the regulators globally. It's like there's just...
Look what happened. Yeah, look what happened to Activision.
There's just no way. Like, I can't see CMA, I can't see the FTC being like, that's fine, you can buy a direct competitor. Like, no. This is like buying a publisher was hard enough, and it should have been hard enough because it's a consolidative effort. It's a monopolistic effort when you try to buy Nintendo, for Pete's sakes. So, I would say what was more alarming to me was the gamers that were like, this would be great. because there'd be more games in more places, like Mario on PC or Mario on Game Pass. I'm like, you have no idea what you're saying. Like, you're literally saying it'd be great if Microsoft bought the king of gaming. Like, Nintendo is king. They don't need any help at all. I found that to be more alarming than anything. It's like, I think we're seeing people's true colors. We're seeing alleged journalists, in quotations, we're seeing journalists who are like, yeah, this is fine, or they hand wave it or act like it's not a big deal. It's like, in any other sector, this would be major news if we saw an email of somebody saying like, oh man, it'd be a career moment to buy my direct competitor.
If you're a customer and you like Nintendo, go buy a Nintendo. Why do you need Microsoft to buy Nintendo so you can purchase it and buy Nintendo? Just go buy Nintendo, right? Maybe, you know what I just thought of, Lono? Maybe Phil, when he says the long game, right? Maybe Phil leaves Xbox, okay? And then he becomes the Nintendo CEO of Nintendo. And then because he tanks Xbox within, Nintendo then buys Microsoft's section of Xbox, and Nintendo now owns Xbox, and Phil wins because now Phil is part of Nintendo, and he owns Xbox, right?
That would be terrible.
I'm kidding, chat. Okay, I'm kidding. I know people are like, this guy's crazy.
I actually like and have said that I would love for Phil to leave because I think Microsoft's unworthy of him. I think Microsoft and the way they've handled Xbox has been terrible. I think their corporate one-size-fits-all policy, their 18-month policy. I think Phil needs to take his talents to South Beach. I think he needs to get the frick out. I think he needs to go.
He's going to go to Miami? He's going to play with Dwayne Wade? What are you talking about?
It's, you know what I'm saying? Like, he needs to leave. He's too, like, you need to go. I think he needs to go and work for a Japanese company because I think he's already laid good groundwork there about he could foster great relationships between, you know, the sort of the Asian business model, the Japanese business model, and the West. I think he could be fantastic for that. Allegedly, some of the things that have been happening lately to broker some good deals in the Japanese market has been Sarah Bond. Right? And I'm supposed to call you out for saying Nintendo, just like our dad. Yeah, my dad always said Nintendo. He takes out that second N. Instead of saying Nintendo, you say Nintendo. You actually say it just like our dad does.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm a dad, so.
In any case, I'm not worried that Nintendo is going to happen, but this to me is a window into Activision Blizzard is basically happening. CMA provisionally approved it this morning because the Ubisoft selling of cloud rights to Ubisoft basically satisfied the CMA.
Right.
And I love that. I love that any regulator that gets in the way, Microsoft's like, what do you need us to do? We need this to happen.
Yeah, okay. We need this to happen. Yeah.
We need this to happen. What do you need us to do? And they did the same thing with their cloud services when there was an attempt for regulatory injunction. They did the same thing. They approached all the companies that had a problem with it and they brokered deals with them, which, you know, Google, not that we need to act like Google is pure, but Google was like, hey, you're still centering the ecosystem of cloud services. It's still centered around Microsoft. And so I have similar concerns here that this deal, all the things that Microsoft was willing to do, they're playing the long game, right? They're okay to loss leads, sell rights, and be like, yeah, that's fine. You know, and in 10 years, they'll turn back around and be like, yeah, it's all ours now. Like, it's ours. What are you going to do? We own it all.
Yep.
And that to me is the worry is this is not the last acquisition. Their path to success is brute force spending, not innovation, not creation. They're going to buy what's already made. And I actually look at Redfall and I'm thinking, okay, we know Redfall internally was Arcane Austin's fault because ZeniMax told them to make a game they didn't want to make. But I look at Starfield and I think, I don't know if this is the game that we were supposed to get. I really don't, because Phil's like, well, Phil says they were able to get involved a lot earlier in production of Starfield, but the ink was dry on this deal 2 years ago. So Starfield was early in production 2 years ago? That can't be right. I think there was elements of production that got set back.
According to that list, it was supposed to launch in 2021.
Right. So what does that mean? What happened
to
Starfield?
Here's if you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, right? Because if Starfield came out in 21, it would have been incomplete. Let's be honest. Okay, it would have been incomplete. And so did Microsoft step in and said, no, you can't release this. We need this to be really good, and we're putting it on our system. Or did they go, no, like just eat it? No, they said, like, they didn't hold on for it for 2 years. They said, polish it, whatever you need, right? Once the deal went through, Bethesda has now Microsoft money. So what do you need to make this game better, right? So did Microsoft hurt it, or did it make it better? And that's for you to decide as the people out there, right? Because some people will go, if Microsoft was hands-on, they ruined the game. And if they were hands-off, they ruined the game. You see what I'm saying? That's the mentality of a lot of the people that look at Microsoft, is that if they touch it, it's bad. And if they don't touch it, they also did bad. They don't look at it as, well, they got involved and they fixed it, right? They always look at it the negative way of, damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah, Wheezy's trying to correct me on the quote, but the direct quote was Starfield was early in production when we acquired Bethesda. Like the interview with XCast, like the kind of funny interview where he did that. Now he may have misspoke, but he made it sound as if that game was in early in production. Like he said, Starfield was earlier in development than Redfall. Not that it was early, but that it was earlier in development and they were able to get involved and help. So, okay, it's not fair for me to say it was early in development. So, again, my question is, why do you need to swarm Bethesda with your own developers? What's wrong with the game at that point? So One of two things was going on. Either Bethesda was a complete train wreck and needed help, or what Phil says is, we got involved earlier in development because we needed to help them with our technology. What technology? What are you talking about? Like, what technology did they leverage?
I don't know. I'm not privy to that information, so I don't know. To answer Leo in chat, he says, if that's the case, why then did delay Redfall? See, again, this is damn if you do, damn if you don't. They even said they didn't get involved with Redfall because upper management. Now, on my podcast, I've talked about this. I said the upper management failed Redfall completely across the board, from Arcane, to ZeniMax, to Microsoft, right? As I don't know if you've ever been and I'm not making fun of you in any way, shape, or form. I don't know if you've ever been in a high position before, but there's people under you, and you can't micromanage everybody, okay? So you have to look at people that you hire and then go, I think you're going to do a good job. Let me know if you need help. And if that upper management in Arcane didn't reach out to ZeniMax, then that upper management didn't reach out to Bethesda and reach out to Microsoft. Microsoft's sitting back going, how's Redfall coming? They're like, everything's fine. Everything's good. And they're like, all right, cool. All right, we trust you, right? Now you can look at Microsoft and go, well, that's their mistake. They trusted the developers. They trusted their upper management. Or you can go, well, see, Microsoft got involved, and that's what happened to Redfall. It's like, which one is it?
Well, and this is now we also have a contradictory narrative here. How is it earlier in production if Starfield, according to their own reports when buying Bethesda, it was projected for 2021? Again, you're saying something that doesn't make sense. If a game is projected to be coming out, it's not earlier in production. I'm telling you, it was a Freudian slip. It was earlier in production because your purchase of ZeniMax reset production on Starfield. You created an environment where it was earlier in production.
Well, you also have to remember, we weren't privy to what was happening and that it was supposed to come out in 2021, right? We thought the original date was 2022, 11/11. So because now we know the information that we do, and then saying they got involved earlier, I mean, obviously the actual date is 11/11 that we knew of as pervy as the preview, as the customers, right? We didn't know all this behind the scenes. Now you're looking at it as hindsight, looking back at the information that we know and see, and then we're saying stuff. But as it was happening, we thought Starfield was on pace to come out 11/11, and then it got delayed from 11/11 22 to now. So.
Right. The direct quote is Starfield was earlier in development when we got them, where Redfall was too far ahead. But again, the internal reports were slating Starfield for a 2021 release.
That's before the acquisition.
Right. Let's just say they were slated for 2022. How are they earlier in production if the game's coming out like a year and a half later? What he's saying doesn't make sense, because you would never describe a game 1 year away from releasing as being earlier in production.
Yeah.
And someone saying, what would reset? Because they were in talks to go to PlayStation 5 exclusive. And I don't think they were building this thing for the Xbox. I don't think they were building it for the Series S especially. I think all of the decisions that we've been told were creative decisions. I think when you have a memory-constrained device, you had to chop the game up. You need a bunch of loading screens. You can't have high-fidelity graphics. You have to cap the game at 30 FPS. That's why it was earlier in production, because you walked in the room and you reset everything. You said, nothing is going to PlayStation now. And this is why we're talking about this, because if their strategy is acquisition of property already coming to the market, this is what they do. This is their legacy. They walk in the room, shake everything. Oh, no, it's not coming to PlayStation now. Their own CFO, Xbox's own CFO, said, wow, in response to Phil informing Bethesda that all their titles were now exclusive. No, it wasn't case-by-case basis like they told the regulators. It was, no, all of it is now exclusive. And you're describing a game that was supposed to come out within a year as being earlier in production. You made a Freudian slip. You just let us all know that you reset production to some degree. That's why they swarmed Bethesda with developers. It was like, we got to help them get this thing running on the Series S. The only other time we've seen them send developers to a studio is Baldur's Gate. Why? They were trying to help get split screen work on the Series S. Why does that matter, though? Why does that not matter? How does that not matter to you? Think of any property right now coming to Xbox. Think Hellblade 2. Like think of anything coming to Xbox, or I'm sorry, anything coming to the market if it gets purchased. If this is Microsoft's path to compete, and Activision has property coming to market right now that we don't even know about, what's going to happen to it once it's in the clutches of Microsoft? Starfield could literally be a cautionary tale. I truly don't think we got the game that Bethesda... I don't think we got the game they were making. I don't. I think something happened. I hope one day we get a Jason Schreier.
We got a better version or a worse version?
I would argue probably a better version, because their vision...
we got a better version.
No, we were going to get a better version.
We were going to get... So we got a worse version in your eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. A super chat from Nicholas Hill. If Microsoft could own Nintendo, then Steam would finally have the big three on PC, and that would be great for everyone since you only need one platform. Monopolistic consolidation of the market's not good for the consumer because it removes choice. Like, I don't think getting Nintendo games on PC requires Microsoft owning them. Nintendo could bring games to PC without Microsoft. PlayStation's doing it. Like, PlayStation has been very averse to PC until, like, I don't know, the last 2 or 3 years. So they did it. How? Well, they sought out porting companies. Like, I don't think Nintendo... That's the other thing I want to ask you about. The last part of Phil's email, on the subject of consolidation, on the subject of buying companies and it hurting games, since I believe that's what happened to Starfield. I know this will be clipped and I'll be called a coping pony. I don't care. I believe that's what happened to this game, and I firmly think that one day we'll get an autopsy on the game the way we did on Redfall, and we'll find out what happened. Because these people worked on this game for a long time, and the standing theory is that consolidation leads to talent loss. I don't know if Bethesda's going to be immune to that reality. But the end of the email about Nintendo, he basically says, in a level of pretty, I think, high levels of hubris, he's like, Nintendo just doesn't realize their future is off of their own hardware. Like he knows better. What do you think of this?
I didn't look at who was the email to. Do you know what I mean? Like, who was it to? A person? Was it to a bunch of people? Was it like? I need to know the context, right? Because, like, if me and you were having a conversation, going back and forth through emails, you would say certain things just because it's a personal conversation, right? Even though it's through email. So him saying that obviously was never to be seen out in public eyes. So I'm sure that if we comb through anyone's emails, you could pick something out and go, what does this mean? You know what I mean? And it could be taken out of context. So I don't want to say that he means that, they need us. I think he's talking to someone going, hey, Nintendo, we want to buy Nintendo. And they're like, you think we need Nintendo? He's like, yeah, they need us, type of thing. Because where we're going, they're going to need us, and they're going to be stuck in the past. I don't know the context, right? And I know someone will be on the comment section going, oh, this guy again. He doesn't want to say one way or the other, right? So I obviously I can't say because I don't know the context of the actual who he was talking to and what the relationship of that person that he's talking to or the people he was talking to.
I mean, to me, I found it humorous. It's like you're in third place, Nintendo is king, and you're like, they don't know that their future is off their own hardware, and I do. And let's just say that's true. Let's say in 10 years, Nintendo realizes there's a massive market to put their games on. Imagine the power that we're seeing in these mobile phones. Okay, well that could run a Nintendo game, for crying out loud. We're seeing Resident Evil. We're seeing Assassin's Creed running on these devices. Well then, Breath of the Wild could run. So let's just say that. Okay, Nintendo's future and their property is going to exist off of their own hardware. There'll be contexts where you'll see their games on PC and mobile. They don't need Microsoft for that. They can do that on their own.
Right.
And that was my issue with it. It's like, you don't need monopolistic mergers to get Nintendo's content on PC and mobile.
Right, and plus, I always call Nintendo Crazy Uncle Nintendo because Nintendo does what Nintendo does and whatever they want. Look, Nintendo should be, they're like the senior citizen in the room. You respect your elders, right? Nintendo single-handedly saved gaming. Not once, but twice, okay, back in the 80s. So Nintendo, to me, is like the godfather of video games, right? Not Atari, Nintendo. Nintendo came in, made quality games, and to this day, they still make quality games. They make a game, they sell a game, and this is why I don't want anyone buying Nintendo. Nintendo, to me, is why I got into gaming. I played Atari first, right? I got introduced to gaming on Atari, but Nintendo is the godfather of gaming. I don't care who likes what box. Nintendo is king when it comes to selling consoles, when it comes to selling software. They know what they're doing. When everyone goes left, they go right. Okay, I would love to see what their new system is, right? Because I made fun of the Switch when it came out. I was like, who's going to want to hold that little tiny controller? Because they remember the ad that they were running? They were at like a park, and there was like 4 people huddled around a small little screen. I was like, who's going to do that? And here we are, right? Here we are, 127 million units, and people, and I play it with my son. I love playing on the Switch, right? I love playing on the Switch.
Yeah.
So they do what they want.
Somebody brought up Pokemon being on mobile. You got to remember that Nintendo's got 32% shares of Pokemon, right? They're like basically a third of the ownership there. And so, but they also have Mario mobile game. Like there's some Mario games out there.
They started creeping out onto the mobile. Yep.
Yeah. And it would not surprise me if Sony is a good catalyst moment for Nintendo to say, yeah, what if we did put our games on PC a year or two later? Like, how many PC people on Steam would be willing to pay $50? Or honestly, if you're Nintendo, you would charge full price. $60, for Breath of the Wild a year or two later, Tears of the Kingdom, these Mario games. Like, they may end up concluding that. But I do think you're going to have to wait, because they're going to say, we drive the hardware numbers harder than anybody. I mean, if you really think about it, Nintendo just drives hardware, even in the handheld, historically, that market alone. And then the Nintendo Switch is just insane. Nintendo Switch 2 could face similar saturation levels because you just get those people to convert over. And it'll be really easy to do that with Microsoft seemingly leaning away from hardware at the time that this thing launches. So from where I sit, Nintendo may end up concluding that, and that's why I think Phil's thinking the same way. He's like, well, we'll play the long game here. When Nintendo decides it's time that the cloud and PC and mobile is worth looking at, we'll be standing there with open arms.
Right.
The worry is, did this email close the door?
Perhaps.
I think that's a possibility.
You don't think they talk this way to each other though? Like the big guys when they sit in a room, the CEOs sit in a room together, and you don't think they banter back and forth and say they cut all the BS? You know what I mean?
I really don't know, because I think in the West we do have sort of that the bull in the china shop CEO, and another CEO kind of respects that. I don't know if in an honor shame culture that would be the same way. Yeah. So I don't know if a Japanese board of directors or CEO would find that to be off-putting or disrespectful.
But what I'm saying is, how do we know that Phil didn't already talk to them about this, and then he was talking to the internal emails to the other people like, yeah, Nintendo's on the table, I want to buy Nintendo. Like, how do we know he didn't physically talk to the CEO. You know what I'm saying?
Right. They may see it and say, "Oh yeah, we already talked to Phil about that.
We've already done this.
That's no big deal."
I don't know. I just feel like big guys like Jim Ryan, Phil Spencer, and what is it, Bowser now? Mike, is it Mike Bowser? Right. I think they get in a room and they literally just they're candid with each other. I don't think they're business. They're shrewd businessmen. Do you know what I mean?
Well, sure, because like Wheezy's saying they're probably more ruthless in Japan. Like I wouldn't surprise me at all if Japanese leadership of these companies is just as, if not more, ruthless. Because in an honor shame culture, you're more worried about the results and success because that's honorable, and the opposite is the opposite is shameful. Yeah. And so they will.
Doug Bowser, thank you.
Yeah. So Doug Bowser. So they will fight just as hard, if not harder, which would make me think there's a lot of honor in doing it without the help of Microsoft, doing it on your own. And that's where I don't think there being a lot of cartilage between the companies for that level of a merger. Now, partnerships or something where maybe they use Microsoft's cloud services or something to that effect, that'd be great, because then you just make a bunch of money off of them just using your cloud services.
Well, here's a real simple test, right? Now that the email's out, they signed a 10-year deal once they get Activision to be over on Switch with the next Switch. If they were really offended by this, they would just cut that deal off, would they not?
Cut what deal off? I'm sorry?
Because Microsoft is signing a 10-year deal for Activision to be on the Switch, like the next Call of Duty games.
Oh, right. Yes.
Right? If they were really insulted by let's say Phil did this and they saw the email and they're like, well, that's it. If they were really that honor culture, they would cut that deal off right away, wouldn't they?
Or they would just renegotiate a better royalty.
Sure.
Like, before the email, we were thinking a 30% was fair for the marketplace, but we're thinking maybe 40. We just kind of feel that would make things a little bit better for you. That would be a good move, Phil. We don't.
You want me to say it? Do you want me to say it in my Japanese accent?
No, don't do that again. Don't do that again.
Sure? Okay.
What's remarkable about that is that people would say, that's offensive or whatever. But if we were talking about a British company and you made a British accent, like nobody would care. Like I don't get that. Like I don't know.
I think they were just surprised that my Japanese accent's pretty goddamn good. I don't know.
I don't think anybody thought that, but I do think that there is. You got to be careful with that kind of thing. I think that kind of thing is totally harmless.
You can't cancel someone that doesn't give a crap, so that's all right.
Well, right. Like an accent is not offensive. Like there are other things you could do and tropes that are offensive. I don't think an accent is an offensive thing to do because people impersonate British and Australian people all of the time. So that's basically the scope of the leaks. Like that's it. We walked through this week. Myself, I walked through the hardware. I walked through the Game Pass stuff, and then this morning we walked through the Nintendo thing. The acquisition thing, and that I think is sort of the gamut of it. And if you guys enjoyed this show, I really need you to do something for me. Smash that like button because YouTube really loves that, and we don't really mention that during the show because I find it to be too disruptive. And I already paid up all the members that I owe you. You guys went crazy, 135 out of 50. If you want to continue with us into VIP, you're going to need to upgrade. But don't fear, tonight, for all members, there will be the Jar Jar Binks Beat Saber stream. And there's no Jar Jar Binks outfits out there. All I got was just a terrible, awful mask. So you're in for what I would consider to be a pretty good treat. So do me a favor. We need like 50-something people or more to smash the like button right now. While you're doing that, I need you to listen to what Mike says because his name is clickable in the description. Mike, where can they find you and what's the content right now?
Right now, you can come and watch me over at 30NSG. I do Monday through Thursday, 10 o'clock in the morning to about noon Eastern. We just read the news. 100% chat is involved. We don't have takes, right? We just have conversations with chat. So 100% come by, be a part of the show. Also, Monday through Wednesday nights we do video games. We're playing Starfield. We're doing Let's Plays of that. I played the first Descendant. Absolutely, I actually kind of liked it. We'll talk about it a little bit out in the after show here. And then Thursday nights we do a podcast at 8 p.m. Eastern called Generation X Gaming. We go over a few top stories from the past week and we rant along the way.
Yeah, if you guys want to come with us, you got a little bit of time to upgrade. You can use the upgrade command in chat. The writers room segment we've been doing all week is for Member Plus and above. So that's pretty much every day. You get to plan the next day's show. But what we're about to do is a little different. It's a once-a-week thing, only on Fridays, and it is a VIP stream. It's unfiltered. You get to hear my producer. You get to hear me. You get to hear Mike. And we might get into some of this stuff on First Descendant because the First Descendant, it was kind of hidden this week. I have a video that's still cooking, and all I did was gameplay. Like, I think people are really interested in this thing, but there's obvious concerns about, like, microtransactions and everything else. So right now, I am scheduling a VIP or higher stream that we'll be going to. And if you want to come with us, you got to upgrade. If you are going to just stay at the gifted membership level or member plus or standard level, don't forget to tune in about 6 hours. So wherever you are in the world, in 6 hours, it'll be 8 p.m. Eastern. I'll be doing that tonight. My wife will be joining me as well tonight. I'm sure she'll make fun of me. That's worth the price of admission alone. Is my wife making fun of me as I do some type of a stream or just sit and talk with you guys. So I'm going to spam a link in chat, and you guys can come to the VIP Unfiltered stream, and I will also redirect you. If the redirect doesn't work, you can use the link in chat. If you're not going to upgrade to VIP, or if you don't have a membership at all, there's great ways to support the channel by smashing like, hitting subscribe. You could also head over to Mike's channel and hit him up with a subscription and consume some of his content while you wait for the membership tonight. If I don't see it tonight or in the next segment, we'll see you Monday. Thanks so much for supporting the channel. Let me head over here and start this stream up. Thanks so much for being a VIP, the weekly VIP Unfiltered stream where I hang out with my friend Mike and my producer joins us. You also have access to the writer's room all week long, member plus and above, which that includes VIP, obviously. You get access to the writer's room, so make sure you've been tuning into those or watching those after the fact. You get to see us kind of plan the next day, and then you get an extra segment on Fridays where you get to hang out with myself, 30 and So Gaming, and Creature. I'm going to end the previous stream where we walked through all of the Xbox leaks. Thanks so much for everybody for watching. Smash like on your way out, and we'll hopefully see you tonight for the members only stream.